Ladies and gentlemen, soccer fans here in St. Louis and around the world, hola, and welcome to another episode of Atleticotv. My name is Josh McGee, here joined as always by Ricky Garza and Luis Swisher. We're really excited to bring you guys another great episode this week. We're going to be covering a lot of different topics across the world of soccer, some on the field and some off the field. But again, really excited for today's episode. Ricky, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm still stuffed from last night from the Super Bowl. A lot of great food, of course. Game not so much, but again, always a fun time and thankful that the game happened and got to see it with family.
It was lame though.
It was.
I wanted a game. The most exciting thing was when the guy ran on the field, it sounded like.
Exactly.
And they couldn't bring him down.
There was much more exciting action on the pitch yesterday than there was on the football field. But again, it's more so about the event, right? Especially if you don't have a dog in the fight. So, I don't know, it was still fairly exciting. But yeah, the game definitely was not as good as it could have been. Luis, how are you doing?
Todo muy bien. All good.
All good. Well, again, very excited for today's episode. Again, we're going to have our coaches breakdown segment, which is going to be important to kind of showcase one particular club, the big club that's struggling right now as to why they're doing so. We're going to talk a little bit about the transfer window that we just had, because that just wrapped up here in January, and a big theme that I thought, at least from the window, from our perspective, as to what's going on in soccer. And then again, we'll have our community segment, important discussion as always about some people who are doing great work in the community. And also, we're going to have a serious topic today. Ricky, you want to kind of preview that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Unfortunately, we have to have this discussion about a sex predator in the soccer community and, a victim of that. And, we're not naming names or talking about specific clubs or anything like that. It's more to bring awareness so families can protect their children.
Exactly. This show is all about fun, breaking down soccer, giving people an education, but also, again, educating and bringing awareness to these important issues, and especially something as serious as this definitely needs some shed some light on it. So we're going to get into that. Before we get all into that, though, I wanted to bring up a quick topic here because we don't have a segment really to talk about it. Obviously, the big match from the weekend was the Liverpool-Manchester City match. Man City dominated 4-1 in this match. Very eye-opening. Very much a stamp on their title challenge right now. They've taken a sort of a commanding lead at the top of the table. But this match was kind of the main thing from it was a couple of goalkeeping mistakes from Liverpool goalkeeper Alisson, trying to play out from the back, taking too long. The pressure got to him and kind of made a couple of mistakes that eventually would lead to two Man City goals very quick in succession that made it a 3-1 lead, which City obviously held on to. I wanted to bring this up because I think it's interesting from a coach's perspective what you guys can bring to playing out from the back, because I can remember very early on when I was following soccer that playing out from the back was a very, weird, not so much weird, but it was not a lot of teams did it. Barcelona, Real Madrid maybe, because that was kind of the Spanish style. Now everybody's playing out from the back. You see it at all levels of professional soccer and right now into youth soccer. My question was to you guys is that your guys' philosophy that you want to play out from the back? And if so, how are you coaching your players in order to execute it properly? Rick, go ahead.
Yeah, from the collegiate standpoint, semi-pro, of course, but even from the collegiate standpoint, when we're looking for goalkeepers, we're looking for goalkeepers that have really good feet, that have range, that can play under pressure. And that's because it's a good weapon to utilize to restart with your keeper, and then the whole team can see how the team's going to defend us. We can see, okay, this is how they're lining up, this is that, and then we can attack that. So it's very important that you have that keeper that we can knock the ball around, move the forwards, figure out what midfielders are going to come out to press us, when they're going to press us, and we do that probably within the first 15 minutes of the game, every game that I've ever coached.
Luis, where do you guys come down on from playing out from the back?
Well, I think it all comes down from that, like Ricky mentioned, is the extra man. So you have 11 guys versus 10. People always ask me, well, why 10? Because the opposition keeper cannot defend on the line. So that's the extra man that you have on the field, right? As a start point when it's a goal kick. So the philosophy is basically trying to have that extra man and finding, it's not basically going, you will have teams and organizations that on their style play, they're more direct or they're more, they're combined and they build up. I think it's an evolution of soccer, right? And maybe it has been there, but we never utilize it. Like Ricky said, people use it and not. But I think when we see at the highest level, people doing it often now, you have more people doing it and doing it. So I think it is recognizing the intention of what you want to do. So it's if you have a +1, then you build up. If you have a +1, you don't have it because you have a high press, then you will have it on the next line. So you will need to skip a line. So it comes attached to also to the qualities, like Ricky said, with the goalkeeper. So in the younger ages, are we implementing and are we teaching and are we, using all this so the players can recognize when they get older and they get professional and they know, okay, when to play short, play long, or go direct. So I think that's the importance of it, how the players can recognize it. And yeah, I mean, when you get to the highest level, you got now the strategic in terms of, in this case, Man City, put in a high pressure. What are you going to do? Are you going to still build up? How are you going to build up with that? That's when it comes to the strategic.
And to answer your question or the topic that you wanted to talk about, which is where Liverpool's goalkeeper muffed it, that you could see it coming as the pass is coming in. The goalkeeper's body language, the effort, there was no intensity to get to the ball. It wasn't there. So the first one was like, oh my gosh, that was a bad touch. That does happen, right? But that second one, where the ball came to him and he just played it to the left, his shoulders were back, he was relaxed, it was a horrible touch. The second one is no excuse.
That's when you ask, okay, are we bringing a player that has the personality to fit the style of what I do? Or, right, you make them, but if there's like you said, there's a player that is not being used to be in those environments, I'm trying to build up, right, or not recognizing those moments, then he's going to struggle. So you need to be super careful. That's what it comes to the key qualities of the player that match your style.
Well, it was certainly eye-opening to me to see these types of mistakes. Like Ricky said, one, it happens. It's a coincidence. Two, though, then you start to ask questions in terms of technique and mentality. And like Ricky said, it just seemed like either it was a lackadaisical thing on Alisson's part, or there was something in his head where, once again, when he saw that same situation, he panicked. So it was definitely, to me, in terms of maybe not just on the going deep into it, the coaching aspect of it, it's about having that mentality, that seriousness of knowing we're right next to our goal. We have to be careful with the ball. We have to have contingency plans for when there's a press. Where can we go with it? There can't just be one option. We have to have multiple different options of how to break it. So, again, it happened.
I would disagree. I wouldn't say it is the mentality. I would say is the characteristics of the behaviors of the personality, because he can try. I have the mentality to do it, but I can't do it. Do I have the traits? Maybe goes through the personality. If it is confidence, if it is he's not can deal with adversity. So the mentality we always get, because players don't have. No, they do have. They wanna, because I haven't known a player that doesn't want to do, the mentality that have a positive, they say any good things. It's just now, does he have the behaviors or the traits to do it? I'm just
okay. Yeah, no, I definitely see that, but it was just eye-opening because it was on the biggest stage. One of the biggest games of the year.
And it happens at all levels. Trust me.
Oh, it does, exactly. But to see it at that type of situation was very eye-opening. But no, thank you guys for your perspective. That's what I was looking for. And there's going to be plenty of that on this show. So we're really excited to bring you guys another great episode here this week. So let's get into it. It's time for the Coaches Breakdown segment. The match that we'll be breaking down for you all this week is the Liverpool-Brighton EPL match from last Wednesday. Liverpool came into the match on a 2-match winning streak. However, those matches were on the road. This match would be played at home, where they hadn't scored a goal in their previous 3 matches dating back to December. Brighton were just hoping to pick up at least a point to help in their battle against being relegated, but our coaches are going to break down how they were able to come away with more than that. Fellas, take it away.
Welcome to the Coaches Breakdown. My name is Luis, along here with Ricky. We'll see one of the games from the past, Liverpool versus Brighton. Ricky, was an interesting game. Let's see how this one goes on the breakdown.
Yeah, it was, and we're definitely going to break down here. We're going to get right into it, and we're going to focus on Brighton because they're four places from the bottom of the table, and these are the defending champs. So we really wanted to put a lot of energy into how did Brighton do this? How did they pull it off? And Liverpool played a 4-3-3. really. And Brighton played a 3-5-2, and 3-5-2 just tore them up. So every time Brighton had possession, they had width, and Liverpool had to continuously be stretched out all the time. And this is what happens when you utilize a 3-5-2 against a 4-3-3. The way the ball gets moved around and the way that Brighton players pull Liverpool out of position is why it seems so simple for Brighton to keep that possession and to isolate Liverpool defenders. A lot of runs in between the lines and whatnot. As you can see in this clip, they get it out wide. He has all this time, all of this space, because they had 5 wide. You know, as you can see here, the 3 center mids are having to get stretched when the outside backs has to come out. That's going to leave space in behind. And so the left central midfielder has to cover that. And now it only leaves 2 center mids in the middle of the field once again. So the left forward now has to drop. And so now there's not a counterattack opportunity for Liverpool because their left winger is having to be within 5 yards of the top of the box. And so this is why Liverpool never became dangerous and they had to defend more, was just because of Brighton stretching them out and stretching those 3 center mids. They would go sideline to sideline in long diagonal balls.
We can see in this one, right, the type of pressure of Liverpool, how they're trying, obviously, Brighton, play between lines. And they get beat in the first line. You're getting out 3 players right away just from a small combination in the middle. And then you're out, right? You're bringing 4 guys to attract them. And then by them not being compact and split allows them to get in between lines. And then obviously what you mentioned before, trying to go from inside and outside to get more width, because that's the formation in a 3-5-2, which it becomes more width. And that allows more space. Now, at moments, Liverpool looked better, right, when they were compact, trying to break and allow that. This on the previous one, obviously, there was a bad touch from the center mid, but that allowed force a mistake. Now we can see here Liverpool trying to do, but the same thing, in to go out, right, because of the type of pressure what Liverpool was making on that specific play, right. You see there the center mids, their body shape, trying to get, if he could get before, he could stretch it ahead of time. And obviously trying to now progress through the flanks. You can see in that one. But the pressure of Liverpool, still was trying to get better and better, which now we can see when they can go in, now there's the diagonal switch, which can help because you have them now tuck in and now you can go wide, right? So now they're out, and that allows them, even though in this one, Liverpool to get it on.
Yeah, and even when the switch doesn't work because they got numbers, they immediately have numbers to counter press Liverpool. So even when Liverpool wins the ball back, they can't progress. I want to focus on this left central defender. He's coming out of the back line to put pressure on Salah. Salah's going to lay it off, and the Brighton supporting players are going to immediately cover the space behind. Keep your eye on this blue highlighted player. He's going to continue, leave Salah, and force this player back or side to side, allowing his teammates to now interchange. So now Salah's been picked up by a new player, and out wide they have good cover. Even though you could say Liverpool got away from the pressure, it didn't matter because Brighton already is back in their 3 backs and their 5 mids. This is the left center back. So one of the midfielders have already filled in his space, and that's what Brighton did for 90 minutes, was just constantly a coach's dream where the players were consistent the whole time. Right here you can see they're in their 3, 5. The forwards are out of view, but they're in the shape so quickly, and Liverpool just does not have any options to penetrate. It was something that was really good. In the clip I think we're going to see is I want to show you how these 3 players stick with their man. They are communicating. They're looking at one another. I've highlighted the 2 players to show you that they stayed with their man. They've still remain a good shape. They're not getting pulled out of position necessarily. Liverpool is trying to pull them out of position. They just stay man to man. They don't give up. They don't zone mark right there. So they were coached up really well for this game. Liverpool has a lot of good 1v1 players, but they held their own, and they did a fantastic job. I have to say. One more time here, the organization. They've made Liverpool play ball back, and immediately they're just sitting back and poised saying, okay, Liverpool, you can have it.
Yeah, besides they're good on defense. Also, now you can see him how they do now on the attacking moment and on the final third, right? You see their movements with their two forwards, right? One checks in, one goes away, and then also, you can see if this one could have turned, could have possibly get something, but that allows the opposite midfielder from Liverpool to think what's going on and getting behind and try to trap the ball, right? It was a moment there. Now when you attract them, we can see because of the type of the formation, always the space is going to be wide. So it's by dragging them in, getting them on balance, and then they can attack. They can say we can attack on the flanks, and then creating an opportunity on the flanks. So you see now in this one, it's the opposite now from Liverpool. Trying Salah to try them what you said, Ricky, in terms of the numbers, right? And then on that one, he didn't get a goal. But now you can see players coming from behind as soon as they lose the ball. There was a lot of transition in this game. There was a lot of for these guys, there was a lot of effort. We have to give them a lot of effort because marking in a deeper zone as a man marking, and now going also putting numbers high and trying to combine, but also giving depth. It's pretty hard. It's a pretty challenge. But you can see it physically they were doing it good. Now you can see as well penetrating between lines. The width is on the flanks, and then trying to get in. The forward defenders from Liverpool now tucking in. Now the space is created on the outside. So this one that was not successful. They couldn't find it, but that was the idea.
And now here's an opportunity. Liverpool, can they counterattack? Brighton has so many players forward. But once again, you're going to see the organization. You're going to see the effort from Brighton. Immediately counter-pressing. The players that have the opportunities to get forward, they're blocking passing lanes. Immediately, they're swarming the ball. He can't go forward. He can't go side to side. So he's forced to go back, and that allows the Brighton players to use their commitment and discipline to get in behind the ball. And this is why Liverpool, who's a good counterattacking team, just couldn't get forward. And so it's a good example here in this clip to kind of show you. Here's an opportunity. You look at this and you think, okay, Liverpool, 3v1 really. This Brighton player is behind the man, and they're already getting behind 5 Brighton players. Could this be an opportunity? Absolutely not. Brighton already had 4 players back. The 5th one recovers the ball. Even when you think Liverpool has a good opportunity, Brighton has everything covered. We're going to break down the goal now, Luis, that Brighton scored.
Yeah, so we'll see here on this one, right? I think, like you mentioned, they were compact in the transition moment. They were always trying to get numbers around the ball. Now we'll see how they built on their half to trying to get obviously the opportunity here to get on the other side. You see how they're looking into, obviously combining, getting them, dragging them. They know that balance in Liverpool is pretty hard. But as well, right, we see that they take a lot in the flanks because that's where do they have more numbers. I would say not numbers, but more space into it. But at moments they will create the space with the numbers.
Exactly. You can see how they have shape around Liverpool's pressure. They want to draw them in so that they can simply just play up and around into the space. Now he has time. Continuously moving the ball where the space was created. Basically, wherever Liverpool left to defend, they were almost a step behind, and Brighton just played back where the defenders were. If you go back and watch that game, that's what you're going to see. Now, split the defenders all game long, whether they're forwards or midfielders, and get the ball from angle to angle. And we're being repetitive with this clip because this is their tactic. This is important for young players and coaches to see.
You can see even though that Liverpool has a good shape, right? You see there's numbers around. They did the same, which that's why I said there was a pretty good transition game for both teams. Even though they're compact, they're not allowing the ball carrier a little bit of pressure, and then putting numbers in the box allows to just watching the ball and not observing man and ball side. We call it ball oriented. So if you're watching the ball, but you also watch who you're marking, and that allows a little bit of disorganization because you see Liverpool just watching one side and not open their bodies to watch the man as well.
And it was a good play with that header, ball coming across, didn't force the opportunity, good run from behind. And what does he do? He plays the ball back across the 6 to give his team a chance to get that goal instead of a wasted opportunity. And this was just a special goal because the goal came literally how they played for 90 minutes, and they got a good goal at the end of it. And that's really cool to watch. It's really cool to see. Hats off to Brighton for taking care of Liverpool, being 4 spots behind relegation. And you would never know that they're sitting at 15th place or wherever they are in the table based on how they played.
Yeah, that was a good match to watch, and especially two different styles with two different type of formation and a team that it is good in something, but how the opposition obviously detect all those things that they have to deny their progression and the way their transition and everything else.
I will give credit to Klopp at halftime. In the second half, they did play more of a 4-2-3-1. They had more organization in the middle to attack, but it was too late because Brighton just had 8-9 players in the box every cross. And again, we didn't want to break down Liverpool's missed chances. It was more about what Brighton did well. We hope that you learned a lot again in our coaches breakdown. We hope you're getting a lot of increased soccer IQ, and we'll see you next week, where Luis and I break down the next game on Atleticotv.
Well, it's been a great show so far, covering a lot of soccer topics today, but there's some topics that we want to highlight on this show about the community, some off-field topics that need our attention, need our awareness, and sometimes they're quite serious. So that's what we're going to do here in this segment. We're going to have an important conversation about a recent story that broke here in St. Louis and how it ties into an important issue that a lot of people are working on to fix, and hopefully we continue to make progress on. Ricky, why don't you introduce our guest who's here to discuss it a little bit with us?
Thanks, Josh. Yes, we're going to have Cindy Spellman come on and give us some insight on the case and what she's learned. And Cindy, we want to thank you for joining Atleticotv today. This is not any particular segment. We've just made this its own thing because it's very important that we open this discussion up to the community. So, Cindy, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. When the situation involving a coach and a player locally came out, it just as a parent of kids in this sport, and for me, having been involved in competitive soccer for the last 6 years locally, I think I was inspired to become a parent advocate for it. I think is the safest way to say it. It really struck a chord with me as a parent, and just having knowledge of the environment and all of the good things in place. And it made me wonder, like, how was something like this able to happen? And what can we do better to prevent it from happening? So I think it's wonderful you're having this conversation.
So Cindy, what was the story that kind of broke, for those who don't know, over the past week involving the local club here in St. Louis, and just overall kind of the facts of the case and the update that was provided?
Sure. So, all of my information is simply just from a lot of the information everyone has as a public, and, being a parent that's trying to help prevent this from happening again and seeing what we can do smarter. But, essentially, late last year, it was discovered that a coach at a well-known club here in St. Louis was having an inappropriate relationship with a player. The player's maybe 15 years old at that time. She might be 16 now. And that's more beyond an inappropriate relationship. That is sexual abuse when you're talking about a man in his 30s having sexual encounters with one of his players. Naturally, the court proceedings pursued, and here this week it was announced that coach has, the case has been finalized. The coach has received his, the sentencing. He received probation, so he's not receiving jail time. I do think he received a bit of a heavy-handed probation. He must register as a sex offender. He is, from what I understand from news reports, not able to be involved in youth or adult athletics going forward in his life. He also has a very strict 5-year probation period. And he must also be a part of a counseling program. And I think that's just the top level summary of it. So hopefully for that family, there's some peace of mind in there. And I understand he pled guilty And because of his guilty plea, some of these negotiations, probably came to be, much to the public and others probably wanting a harsher sentence. But I think the heaviest the judge could do gave it to him, barring jail time for his very poor decisions.
It's kind of amazing, though. I believe he already was on probation for getting in assaulting a female officer when he was drunk and didn't get a DUI.
Yeah.
Was on probation. Is that right? And he already had probation before this.
Yeah, when this case involving the player came to light, that I learned about that too. It amazes me that someone can be can be driving down the wrong way of a road, drunk, get pulled over, assault an officer, wrestle her to the ground, and still be able to coach soccer. Blows my mind. Not just coach soccer, still be able to be involved in mentoring kids in any way. That said, though, I've done some homework, since this came to light, and the right steps were followed, at least from an organizational standpoint. I don't know about from the club standpoint, and I'm suspect to what steps were followed from there. I'm disappointed in the club, but at least from an overarching structural organization, the steps were followed. I mean, at the time his coaching license would be renewed, his litigation was still pending and not finalized in the system that the background check system checks. So it didn't flag in a certain way that, normally that it would, had this been something finalized and a felony been applied to it. But he also got a lesser charge on that. So the right step was followed in the background check process. It's unfortunate. I think in light of all of this, we now kind of have it on ourselves. How can we make this background check process better? Because yes, it should have been flagged. I find it very hard to believe that some people in decision-making roles within the club he was affiliated with were not aware. I find it hard to believe that they didn't see patterns of behavior that concerned them and they just kind of let it go because we're trying to be good people and we never want to get anyone in trouble. So I, as a parent and as someone who's just gathered information, I suspect some poor decisions were made that created an environment that allowed this to happen. And I hope that the background check process gets stricter, or the guidelines that says, there's a fine red line here. If you cross any of these red lines, you lose your ability to be a mentor or to have access to kids as in a coaching role. That didn't happen in this case, but hopefully that's an outcome.
Our organization, Club Atleticotv, we are, my mom and I, we get trained on anti-human trafficking and what to spot for victims, what to spot for predators. And there was clearly in this case, although the predator wasn't coercing her for financial gains, he was still grooming this girl. And as a soccer mom, we know from the educational side of, they go after your social media, they communicate with you there. They're not calling your house anymore saying, can I talk to your daughter or son? But there was communication there through via direct messages and Instagram or whatever. So as a mom now, or a parent in general, what does that feel like to know, there's just, that was going on and under, you know what I mean? I mean, that's just, we wanted to bring this because that, from our standpoint, it was all just trying to protect kids from being trafficked. But this abuse is along the same line of still protecting kids from being abused. And we hope to get more content out there and people. But from a soccer mom standpoint, talk to us like a parent.
Yeah, it's giving me goosebumps right now hearing you talk about that, because I think I had that same reaction when when all of us learned about it in the news. I thought, how could this happen? And it was a reality check for me and for my husband. That background checks we kind of put a false sense of security in background checks. And I think if anything, that was a big reminder for us. I go through Sports Safe. I volunteer at schools. I'm a Girl Scout troop leader. I have background checks, probably 3 a year for different organizations. And when I think of that and wonder how someone still got to that point, it surprised me. And I think you're doing the right thing by prompting conversation about it. I think that's lacking. As a parent with 2 kids involved in competitive soccer or any sport or any organization, we entrust these adults, and we entrust like, oh, they've taken the right steps, if people have a background check, they're just with our kids for an hour. But we're also giving our kids devices, and so that we can call them after practice, or if something changes, they can call us. That's creating a level of communication that adults can now have access to kids on, that if we're not engaged parents, we're missing. And I think this is just a really smart reminder of how important this responsibility as a parent will never ever end until our kids are well out of our home. It is really on us as parents to, one, if we see something that even just concerns us, prompt a conversation, but also to talk to our kids about situations that are appropriate and are inappropriate. I think it's also important to, I think it's important for entities like soccer teams, lacrosse teams, cheer, etc., to have proactive conversations with the parents, not just the coaches, but with the parents. We can talk about, here's our COVID-19 policies. Everyone's comfortable talking about that. Everyone's comfortable talking about, this is what we're going to do for indoor soccer, or here's what we hope to get out of this next season as your player trains. But just as comfortable, we need to say, and by the way, here, we want you to know we take protecting your kids and your families very seriously. We will never host training off site. We will never be texting directly with your kids. If we will never have private training smaller than in groups of 2. I personally feel if we take that elephant out of the room and talk about that, suddenly I feel a little more accountable, because I've now just said that to you. The next thing you know, the 3 of you, the 5 parents around us, we're like, oh, we're kind of all on the same page about this. We see our club leadership on the same page about this. And I think if we all have that little bit of self-accountability to each other, we've now minimized the environment where something like this will be happen. And I think a final thing that's key to this is parents being comfortable speaking up without retaliation. So I became a little outspoken about this case, just as a parent, to really, we could sit back, but if some of us don't make effort to help get things changed, nothing's going to change, right? But as I became more outspoken, I have had a lot of parents in our area and a lot of coaches reach out to me and say, gosh, I saw this person in XYZ environment, it didn't feel good to me, I wish I would have spoken up. Or someone said, wow, I was on a travel trip with my daughter. I saw the coaches do XYZ. I didn't think it was appropriate. Now, it's a different organization, but they're like, I didn't speak up. So I started asking these parents or these coaches, why didn't you say anything? Just out of curiosity, why didn't you say anything? And the number one reason was, I didn't want to stir the pot. The other reason was, I didn't want to get the person in trouble. Well, guess what? If the person's not doing anything wrong, they're not going to get in trouble. And 2, if you're the person that's got that spidey sense telling you something's wrong, something probably is. And we have to make parents realize it's okay to speak up without fear of retaliation. And I can sit there and say to you, you're not going to have any retaliation. We're not, but we have to show that, right? We have to do that through our actions and make sure. And when we're having this conversation, hey, we want to work to keep your kids safe. Here's 3 ways throughout the season you can help do that. 1, here's a phone number or email you can reach out to. Here's the 5 safety checks we do each year. Give them a channel. I think parents will be willing to do something if they know how to navigate it. And if we are out there every 6 months saying to them, follow this pathway if you have any concerns. Just a reminder, it's not like a buckle your seatbelt, right? Just a reminder, make sure you're not leaving your kids alone in situations where these might be happening, things like that. And I think if we start making that part of our athletic lifestyle, in the sports environment, the situations where this happening will decrease, and the predator is not going to have as many avenues, because it's going to make him very uncomfortable, or her.
I was gonna say that. I mean, it all comes to the education that we give from all the different sides, right? Because we're talking about not only parents, but also we're coaches, so the coaches side as well. I've been in the past in 2 different organizations, and it was funny that one happened the same that happened to this one, right? And then now they started to work in all the things that you just mentioned, right? And I was a part of another organization where, it was so big, the education for this, to feel those predators uncomfortable, because it was all the time reinforcing. as a coach, this is the way that you need to behave. This is the way that you need to do this. You're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed. Sometimes it goes like, and when I was at that moment, I was younger from coaching, but I thought it was like, what is all this happening? Especially me coming from a different country was a big shocking. But then once I know everything, I was like, yeah, it's super important, and it just feels the coach is more from one side safer, and from the other one, the ones that they're not good, they feel like you said uncomfortable doing those things, and they will leave the environment because there's a more protection towards everything, right? So I think you kind of nail it in everything. It goes not only from the leadership groups, it's all about, making this type of education with coaches, with parents, with players, from the parent side as well. I want to know, I'm a parent, I want to know, what the organization is giving to my kid as a safe environment, because we know that it is on paper sometimes, but it is how we execute it and how we follow, I think, when it becomes the most important part for myself.
Yeah.
Well, and you guys probably have been invited to a team party or a team holiday party or something, right? Like, what thought process do you go through? I know my kids' coaches don't go. They won't. They're like, have a great time. They say we don't go. And I know that there's a lot of clubs have reached out to me since this came to light to say, like, how can we support this awareness? And there are a lot of clubs that have that same policy, which is good. So, I do think there are great organizations, great clubs out there. And I think we just need to continue to get better. But have you been in situations where parents are like, hey, can you give my kid extra training, or we're having a team party, can you guys come? And then how do you guys handle those situations?
Right. Well, I mean, I don't have really an experience coaching girls or women, but I do want that to be another topic now, is that the abuse is not just female, that boys are getting abused. My family, my mom and I, we do this training, and sometimes it gets so much mentally, we have to take a break from the training, because you don't want to hear about a 6-year-old girl from Kirkwood and what she had to do on the east side for the last 2 weeks. And you don't want to hear things of the little 10-year-old boy from O'Fallon, Illinois. I mean, this is all stuff within the last 12 months. But knowing that data, knowing all those things, parents need to understand this isn't a soccer thing. This is just a teacher, coach,
Position of authority.
Friend. The majority of the abuse for children come from a family member, family friend, family acquaintance that kind of falls into teachers and coaches. And there's a high statistic that it's someone close to you. And unfortunately, these predators don't look like in trench coats or, hey, I'm a predator. They're at your bank. They're at your grocery store. They're standing behind you at the gas station. They blend in. And they groom, and unfortunately, they can be familial, within your family. So there's just so many things to watch out for with your children these days. I hope that we as an organization can kind of take this and focus. It's all in God's timing. Here we are not having a season this summer, which means we're going to have time on our family's hands to serve. Maybe this is the right time for our family to get this content out to the masses this summer, and turn what is a financial tragedy in our club into a community positivity with this subject. And I'd like you to be involved, like we discussed on the phone. Any other people that want to get involved. I'm so happy that you came on the show and were so vocal from the beginning about this, because I couldn't find a lot of people talking about it. And we're just honored that you came on and were willing to speak up on behalf of soccer moms and dads out there.
Thanks, Ricardo. I think you're starting something good. You've been doing something good, but I agree that putting attention on is good. I have found these last few months that many people are willing to help and speak up. I think they just don't know the path. And I think if we can create the path for them to be involved and support raising more awareness, I think we will get a lot of people on board and start making this a much more comfortable conversation for the right reasons.
Cindy, before we let you go real quick, just wanted to give, again, more awareness. Speaking of awareness, a little bit of what you're involved with in soccer. You're part of the advisory board for the St. Louis Lions, another local club here in St. Louis. Talk to me a little bit about the campaign for this upcoming season to help out with the men's and women's teams, what you guys are doing.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Yes. like the organization you guys are involved in, the St. Louis Lions has a men's and women's team. It's a path to pro for college age players. And like your team, like others, have been heavily hit by the pandemic. A lot of the funding comes from camps that would have been held last summer for this year's season. So we are seeking community support to help make the seasons happen for them, to cover the operational costs, because as you know, in minor league sports, there's not a lot of funding. There's a lot of self-funding and a lot of private partnerships. So we have different fundraising efforts going on, but one specifically that a lot of your audience can help us support with is GoFundMe. It's a nice sports team GoFundMe program now. And there's a St. Louis Lions GoFundMe page with which people can find on the St. Louis Lions social media.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much again for talking with us today about this important issue. Looking forward to having more conversation in the future and hopefully, putting a dent in this issue going forward. So thank you so much for joining us, Cindy.
You bet. Thanks to you guys for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, Rick, I want to get into a soccer topic here from this past month because we are into the month of February, which means we wrapped up the January transfer window. Across Europe, across some of the other bigger leagues, across the U.S., there are a lot of different interesting stories. Not as much big players moving, which can be understandable because of the pandemic. Teams don't have as much money to spend on players, but I thought from an American perspective, it was a pretty big window. And I want to highlight a little bit of that trend here. I believe, again, looking things up, my math may not be incredibly 100% correct, but I believe around 15 players or so from MLS were able to secure moves from MLS to Europe. They were either loan moves or they were permanent moves, at least in one player specific cases. These are guys, it started in the month with Brendan Aronson and Mark McKenzie from the Philadelphia Union, making some big moves to the likes of FC Salzburg and Genk in Belgium. And then you had guys like Jordan Morse, who had a great season with Seattle and was able to secure a loan move to Swansea City in the English Championship. There was all these types of different moves, and like I said, around 15 players or so from this past month, but we are now up to around a little bit over 50 American-based players in European leagues now plying their trade. And then, of course, that ranges from the likes of Christian Pulisic and Weston McKennie to now some of these guys that have just moved from MLS. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this trend, and this has just been the dynamic, that we've had to deal with over the past, decade or so. European-based versus MLS-based or American-based players. How do they figure into the U.S. men's national team? How do they figure just in American soccer in general and about player development and things like that? I want to ask your thoughts before I get into my kind of opinion about all these players making these moves. You've had experience sending players off to different countries and to different leagues. What that does for their development, why positives and negatives about it.
It's extreme development if you can send someone overseas, South America, Europe. Absolutely. And I think it's great for U.S. soccer. If we're going to make it be anywhere in the soccer culture of the world, it has to be players that are playing around the world. You can't have a team of MLS players that never left. And they learn more, they know how to play those levels, and then they can bring that experience back to the national team.
Yeah, I think that from a national team perspective, I'm very excited about this. I think this has been the direction they need to go on for years. Some of these guys, they're not going to be involved with the national team. It's just good for them to get these types of moves. But some of them, like the two Philadelphia guys I mentioned, Jordan Morris, Paul Arriola from DC United also moved to Swansea. He has the U.S. men's national team experience. This is important for them. They need to be playing right now. As much development as you can, going up against the best, getting looks, and doing these types of things in order to help out the men's national team.
The big picture, Josh, is this. If say you're a parent, you're tuning in right now, and we're talking about these 20-something-year-old guys going to Europe. How does that affect you? You're a St. Louis soccer parent, right? Here's how it affects you, right? So 5 years ago, this wasn't happening. 2 years ago, this wasn't happening. 10 years ago, it wasn't even a discussion, okay? It's one or two trickle over. If more and more U.S.-born players play a little bit here and then move up and develop over there, and they're making more connections in Europe, and your kid's a club kid and might somehow statistically fall into the pro system here with the MLS or whatever, it's creating a path for the youth coming in that move on into Europe. So it increases your chance of the next generation of children that are playing the game now and developing to actually progress to where you see more Christian Pulisic's from the United States. Like, there's a few names you say and you're like, wow, he made it. Well, the more go over in volume, the more statistical chance we have to have more quality players in the United States.
And it's a good highlight to what these clubs are doing at the academy level, because FC Dallas's Brian Reynolds makes a move with an option to make it permanent to AS Roma. Roma right now are in the thick of it in Serie A, and an incredible title race. But it's because of, and he was rumored to actually potentially move to Juventus. Why would Juventus be interested in him? Because the first FC Dallas guy they bought was Weston McKennie, who has ties to their academy system. He was a success. So that instantly builds credibility and say, hey, if this player is this good, we need to be looking at this type of system. So if these MLS clubs and their academies are getting looks at the world stage, and we've become an established partner with these clubs that can do business and know, hey, we're getting quality players from that league, it is very good for MLS. And I'm very excited about that possibility with the U.S. men's national team. I guess it's just the selfish person, the selfish fan in me that looks at MLS and says, well, hey, a few years ago, we had a bunch of old guys here, Frank Lampard, Steven Gerrard, that were trying to build up, exposure for the league. And it wasn't in terms of quality of soccer. They were getting in the way of some of these other types of players. Now, of course, we're developing these players, but they're all going off into Europe. So I guess the selfish part of me is that how does the MLS continue to maintain this type of success? I want them to be a partner on the world stage, but at the same time, I would like to see some of them players.
Well, hopefully what happens is then the next kid that's 2-3 years younger get the opportunity to fill the void. And if you start having a pipeline of developing and moving on, which I know everything about from the junior college game to the semi-program, that's how you're successful, is you create the pipeline. Your goal is to move someone out so you can move the next one in and keep the machine moving forward. And from the financial gain side of this equation of guys moving over, here's something you got to look at. There's a financial ripple effect that could be positive for America, because if more Americans are monetized by brands, which is a big thing. I mean, you just had the lawsuit with the women against the men with the pay and all that. Well, there's more marketability on the men's side with the financial, okay? That's how they get paid more. In this circumstance, more people that are monetized from America that play abroad, money comes back into the system. And this is where later on in the show, we'll talk to Brock about, the mindset of developing entry-level minority kids, giving them opportunities, but there's lack of funding. If U.S. soccer is getting more brand financial gain, and then they trickle that out to U.S. clubs and U.S. youth soccer associations and all of that, and they say, hey, we're getting more quality players, we want to see more development in certain areas of town. Now all of a sudden St. Louis has a fund to do that. So that's where I see it, that I excited, is maybe funding will trickle down, because brands follow monetization, and Americans going abroad is monetized.
And I should say, since you brought them up, the women are well represented in this discussion as well. We've seen a lot of U.S. women's national team players move to this FA Women's League, to where at the point, I think that the U.S. is closing in on like a top 5 list in terms of the amount of players from one nation involved in the league. And that's obviously a predominantly English league. And for the U.S. to now creep close to the top 5 just kind of states to the, implication of just how much they've grown as a side and how much they've really people have invested in them going forward. So it's definitely both ways, and it's a positive trend definitely for the national team level. And I like the way that you explained it in terms of, hey, it's not like you get rid of a player and there's just this big massive hole. There's another guy coming,
and
there's another women's player coming. Hopefully, if you're like a system, like you've seen with FC Dallas and Philadelphia and some of these other places, they're consistently developing players.
Look at FC Porto in Portugal, right?
Yeah.
That's what their system is built for. Build up Cristiano Ronaldo, sell him for a lot of money. That's okay if the MLS is that. MLS isn't going to, come on, MLS is not going to compete with the world leagues. Our viewers don't get excited to go watch MLS. You have a hometown team like we do, City SC, absolutely we're going to be excited to go to a game because it's here. I'm not getting up early to go watch a Columbus Crew game, okay? We all are watching EPL and La Liga, right? But be what you can be and be successful. And the MLS is going to be a feeder to grow soccer and get more youth players in. I'm going to be a big freaking MLS fan for that, right? And obviously, homegrown players and people in this area, I'll watch them if they're playing with the MLS. It's more like having that pride in the player and who they're playing for than it is for the club, because City's going to have our support, obviously, because they're hometown.
Well, that's at the end of the day, that's what gets us excited, right?
Yeah.
And in a couple of years, when St. Louis City SC gets into existence, that we can have these discussions about players that we develop homegrown for City, and also players that are so good they go onto the world stage and do great things. I think that's what's the exciting part.
And you
of
brought up the women's game. I think next week we're going to try to do our best to find a quality women's game online, and I think maybe we'll break down a women's game next week.
Definitely, I think that's something that we got to get to because again, they're doing great stuff, obviously. And during the pandemic last year, the NWSL were the leaders in that. So hopefully we continue to showcase more of that here going forward. But again, interesting trend. A lot of American players making moves to European clubs. There's a lot of good from it. There's some questions in terms of trends can be sustained, but overall, I think there's a real positivity going forward that Americans are going to be well represented on the world stage.
Welcome to our community awareness segment. Today, Ricky will have someone that has the work and with the community has done a great job. I want you to introduce him today.
Yeah, thanks, Luis. And as you know, if you are new to the show, the community segment is about showcasing someone in the community who is trying to better the St. Louis region. And Brock Chatman is that individual. A little background on Brock: he's the only other minority head college coach in St. Louis. He's I think the only second black head coach that in my lifetime, and it's very important to say that because it's an honor to be able to have a minority in a position of this, because it's really not something normal in the collegiate game right now. And on top of that, you have someone who's carrying himself really well, who's in that position, and that's why he's going to talk today about what he's doing with youth. I think that's so important, as what we believe in is the youth is the future of St. Louis, and be able to utilize sport as a platform and to grow them. And that's what Brock does. He's got a soccer academy and camps that he does. I've watched him. He's also left St. Louis to pursue his collegiate game in Iowa and Louisiana, and now come back home to where he grew up and coach here in St. Louis. So, Brock, welcome to Atleticotv, man.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So I know you already know Luis already, obviously, with recruiting and whatnot at the collegiate game, and it's your third collegiate season coming up here locally, right?
Yes.
And but let's tell the viewers and whatnot, why you're focusing with youth when you could just be focusing on your collegiate game and recruiting. Why are you focusing on youth as well?
Quite simply, it's I want to help the United States win a World Cup. I strongly feel as though the United States is missing the minorities or black people, black kids in the sport of soccer to help us get there. With my background, coming from St. Louis City and being coached by so many great coaches, I feel like I have a lot of knowledge to give. And there's a lot of athletes that just don't get the game offered to them, right? So the biggest thing is kind of narrowing the access gap, right? Giving them the opportunity or just introducing them to the game. That alone may change the numbers. And over the last year, it has. Just had a project this summer, and it was a idea. And in 3 weeks, 40 or 50 kids excited about playing soccer, parents excited about playing soccer, and then at the end of our 6-week camp, they were asking for more. So that tells me that just offering the game is one thing, but now we're on to the next step. The next step is offering quality training.
It's fantastic, and Luis is a hero in my book as well, because he's not from St. Louis, comes to St. Louis, gets involved in the club game, and as Brock knows as well, there's not a lot of minorities in club soccer, and whereas Luis has come in and the academy team that he coaches is very diverse, and you've given people from all walks of life, all color opportunities, and you're winning with them and you're developing with them. And so let's kind of open that discussion here of, why do you guys think St. Louis is just, like you said, you need more minorities to win a World Cup and all those things. And in St. Louis, there's just not a lot playing. What's going on?
Quite simply, is this I guess I'll say a more affluent sport. When I say narrowing the access gap, I mean not everyone in our community has the dollars to pay for a club. And second, they may not have the parents' availability to drive them, 20, 30, 45 minutes, a parent or a grandparent. So it's being in those communities and actually giving them the access right in their backyard and making it easy. And then how we develop from there is the next step. But that was my goal, is to offer them something that was of quality, close to home, and just the introduction to get them to like the game. And I said like the game. I try to use my words correctly, but they left at the end of 6 weeks loving the game. So I think that was a huge step in the right direction.
I think that's one of the things that if you go back, right, when you grew up and you didn't have any of those type of opportunities, so it was on yourself trying to find the ways into those, trying to get into a club soccer, getting into, trying to get to the highest level of what you play. So I think that's one of the struggles, I guess, right? So what Brock is doing is just opening up and bringing an opportunity to these kids in, like you said, in their backyards. I think that's the main thing, right? Because when people doesn't have access to those things, it's like, what should I do now? Where do I go? And then they go away and they, instead of playing the sport, they do other things, right? So I think it's awesome. I went through something like that. I think life, and especially here in the United States, is so different because of the distance, because of everything else. So you need to find your ways to go train, to go, to try to do and have an opportunity to play soccer. And I think, what Brock is doing is basically giving that opportunity. Hey, I'm here. And like you said, there might be kids there that they don't even like the sport or they don't know about the sport. But as soon as you give them a ball, you explain them. And like I thought that was interesting to say, I'm not only giving them the opportunity, but I'm giving them quality. So I think you have the experience, you being in the game, and then you have educated yourself to teach. So you're giving them back to the community a little bit of what you don't. And I guess we all didn't have us as it is now here in the present, right?
Yeah, and I love the goal of, like, right away, your first answer, Brock, is want to win a World Cup for the United States, like setting the bar high. And you have to be passionate about that to go out every day with that goal. What is your vision of of what you're doing now with the kids? What's your vision in 2, 3, 4, 5 years?
Well, right now it's just to really gauge how big the interest is. I think that that 40 or 50 will grow or has grown. And just being in that space, right? I've made valuable relationships with clubs or organizations that I didn't even know that were there, that have an interest in soccer, right? So that grows the number. So my goal is to definitely continue in the realm of offering quality soccer, but something that we can handle. When you talk about numbers, it could get too big, but I know what I can handle. So having a club would be very nice, and then some support to clubs like Atletico, like obviously the MLS, the bigger clubs here, and I think it's creating a pipeline from grassroots, high school, college, academy, pro. I think that very soon here in St. Louis, the pipeline will be there. And I'd be lying if I didn't say that I wasn't the perfect person to help make that happen.
I think that St. Louis is ready. I think, we had Jorge on the show, the first episode, who actually took a lot of Latinos and put them in Sliça. Like, that's a real big gap, like to go jump from just getting kids together and then boom, throwing them in the club. But I think there's time now in St. Louis because of the financial barrier, the location barrier, having to go all the way out west, and to have I wouldn't call it, I guess you could call it lower level league, where it's not sanctioned, and you get 4 or 5 people with the right ideology of this, and you just create hey, no, we're not sanctioned, you don't get points to win our tournament, but we're organized. I think it's time, man. Don't you?
No, I agree. It's funny that you say that because in those relationships that you that I've made and I've had for over 10 years, you know, there's some that have been working in that space. New Dimensions Association is working on creating that league that you're speaking about,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is very ironic.
I just wish that they would expand because
Yeah.
they're sort of like they're doing something really good, but they're just kind of stay in one neighborhood, like one area. But that's okay if we have other areas like the area that you're working in, a few areas I'm working in, Jorge, and then I think if we had a group of people that weren't sport minded, but were community awareness, wanted to increase low-income families, bring awareness to things. They were running the league and using it as a platform to make change. And then us soccer people of the same heart could run a league. We could be that void. That's what I dream about when my head goes down. And so that's when I get excited when I see you online and doing something. It's like, okay, we're getting there. And then Jorge pops up on the radar. He's like, we're getting there. I think we're close,
Yeah.
Rock.
I agree. I think that for me in my community in St. Louis, you know, it's tough to connect and work together. But the pieces are there. My good friend that has been working with me to create what our academy, you know, our club is in the community. You know, not necessarily a soccer guy, but you know, I think that the ideas, it's like sitting at a table like this with the right people, and that once the ideas flow and the connections happen, it takes time, obviously, but slowly but surely.
Tell our viewers where we go from here. Where do they contact Brock? They're interested. They want to help you grow, man. Tell them now where to go.
Yeah, let's connect. So I am on all of social media, VBLC3, THEBLC, the number 3, and my email is Brocklin, BROCKLON @fastfeetacademy.net. You can reach out to me. I'm pretty accessible. Let's connect. Let's move forward.
I think it's great, you know, this, and the idea it is to have more people aboard and then synchronize everyone on the same page and collaborate and work together towards one mission, because at the end I think it's not only you, it's to develop players so that the U.S. can go to the World Cup, right? So it's you start from little to do big things after. So I think it's great what you're doing, and I encourage you to keep, and I know you will have more kids, you know, you will have more people involved, you have more support, and that will help to grow what you want to grow, right? So I think it is great.
If you like this community awareness segment, if you have someone in your community you think we should know about, please contact us in the comment section of Facebook, and we'll like to have he or she on. That's what this is for.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Atleticotv. Ricky, I don't know about you, man, but I feel like we covered the gambit today. We did a lot of important work, and hopefully, you know, going forward, people are now aware of certain issues. They've been educated on certain things on the field, off the field. And again, that's if people ask. That's the main goal of the show, right? I mean, it's what we do in terms of covering everything that isn't really being covered and continuing to help out people who really need it right now.
And that's what makes us feel good, is building a platform that actually brings awareness to our community. And I think we did that today.
Exactly. This is not so much a show. Of course, we would love it if you guys, you know, like, comment, subscribe, share, in terms of just the entertainment value, and people, if you're interested in these types of topics. But for the main reason for it to be shared is to get this stuff out there, to bring awareness to these certain issues, bring awareness to people doing great work here in the St. Louis community from a soccer perspective, but also just from a community perspective. So that's the real important thing that we ask of you guys. Again, these shows are posted on our Facebook page, Atleticotv, every week. And again, you know, continue to consistently put out good content for you guys. Continue to have a great run of guests. We're going to keep that up as well. And again, just continue to shed light on these issues and shed light on what's going on in soccer from our perspective. So another great episode. We want to thank again Local Radio STL for providing us this platform to have this show. Our thanks to our producer Key. Our thanks to Monk in the back working on the sound and the audio for us. And again, for Luis and for Ricky, I'm Josh McGee saying thank you. Have a great week, and we'll be right back here next Monday with another brand new episode. Adios.